In other news, Bob Iger, CEO, former, now executive chairman of the Walt Disney Company, gave an interview this past week that is very revealing. He was asked about what the parks might look like upon return, when and if they do down the line. We know they will eventually. We just don't know when. And one of the quotes that got pulled from this is very interesting. It says, one of the things that we're discussing already is that in order to return to some semblance of normal, people will have to feel comfortable that they're safe. Some of that could come in the form ultimately of a vaccine, but in the absence of that, it could come from basically more scrutiny, more restrictions. Just as we do bag checks for everybody that goes into our parks, it could be that at some point we add a component of that that takes people's temperature. For instance, we're studying very carefully what China has been trying to do in terms of their return to normalcy. As one of the things that's obvious is they've conscripted a large segment of their population to monitor others in terms of their health. You can't get on a bus or a subway or a train or enter a high-rise building there, and I'm sure this will be the case when their schools reopen without having your temperature taken. So we've asked ourselves the question, let's prepare for a world where our customers demand that we scrutinize everybody, even if it creates a little bit of hardship, like it takes a little bit longer for people to get in. Just as the case after 9/11, where people ultimately lived with the notion that in order for them to enter a building, if you're in an office building, you have to show a picture ID or get your picture taken to be screened, or in order to enter a park, you have to put your bags out there to be checked, and you go through some kind of metal detector, or certainly what's going on in airports with TSA. Katrina, are you comfortable with the idea of more scrutiny at the parks to get in if it means opening these parks up, getting your temperature taken?
I don't mind. I feel that they kind of have to, and then it's partly for like safety for them too, because if, it someone came in with like the virus and then it spread throughout like the whole day, I mean, that would be a catastrophe. So for me, I wouldn't mind a longer bag check. Obviously, sometimes bag check does get a little lengthy, but if it's for everybody's health and safety, I feel like everybody needs to put it past them and just do it. If they really want to go to the park. I
Yeah,
guess
he did mention something here that I thought was very interesting, by the way, and that was more along the lines of, a semblance of normalcy and to make people feel comfortable. And I think it's important to really examine that because, I mean, this is the first kind of public interview that he's really given since all this went down. And something that he says there, to make people feel more comfortable, we have to realize that for a number of years after 9/11, I mean, the bag check even was really just for show. They weren't really digging. They weren't really, I mean, at Disneyland, it wasn't even by security cast members like it was out, east in Walt Disney World. And for a number of years, it was just to make people feel comfortable. It wasn't necessarily going to prevent a whole lot, just, it all depended on the cast member, up until the point where metal detectors were rolled out there. And that's, I mean, we're only talking the last few years where that's become a reality. So to make people feel more comfortable, it might just technically be for show. Tyler, you wanted to weigh in?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I think that's exactly kind of the problem is that it is going to be for show and people, I guess that will make some people feel comfortable, but it doesn't really make me feel that much more comfortable, especially knowing that you don't have to exhibit any symptoms to have this coronavirus even right now. So even if you don't even have to have a fever and you could still have it. So to me, it's really not that big of a change. What would make me feel better than taking everybody's temperature is if they actually brought in x-ray machines so that I didn't have to have random people digging into my bag every time I brought a bag in. And even if you have your gloves on, you still just dug into that person's bag in front of me and that person's bag in front of me. And that, you know what I mean? So
Sure.
You're literally touching everybody's stuff. To me, if they don't get x-ray machines after this, I don't know what they're doing. That would make me feel better than taking temperatures, honestly.
Like, do you want a machine like Universal Studios?
Yeah, like Universal Studios does, where every bag you have, you just throw it through the x-ray machine. I mean, I think that's, I think that's the safest way to go at this point, personally. And not just for people who are sick, but also that's a much better way for any security people to be able to see what exactly is in everybody's bag. So, I mean, it's a win-win on that front.
And we've also learned that, just because you're displaying a fever, perhaps not displaying a fever, doesn't mean necessarily that you aren't carrying the virus or that you aren't, somebody that has other symptoms just because maybe you're not displaying a fever. So just doing a temperature check doesn't even really solve the problem. So, Garrett, are you comfortable with the idea of longer lines for the sake of potentially a better, more healthy environment in the parks?
Yeah, for me, whatever it takes to give people that sense of security is always better. Granted, Disney security is a false sense of security where if something were to go down, I'm not going to count on those guys and gals to watch out. Like, there's a reason why Orange County sheriffs are in every single park, because if something were to happen, whether a weapon goes off or some kind of big fight, the Disney security, like, they can pull you apart, but I'm not going to feel safe until I see like a sheriff officer coming in like with rifles or something like that. Like, having a temperature check, it'll do much, but it's like Tyler said, that does not mean that you're not a carrier. You can carry it and not show symptoms, but I can handle longer lines. I know many guests can't, and they complain about the lines. I honestly complain more about the line to scan in than the line to get through the bags, honestly. Like the touch point, those lines annoy me more than anything. But one thing relating to this I just want to bring up is, why did they have Bob Iger, who is the former CEO, go on and give this report rather than Bob Chapek, who's the current CEO? I would think that you'd want the leader to give this report. Granted, I love Bob Iger. I have his book and I adore the guy, but I'm just curious as to why they brought on Iger instead of Chapek.
I think it's something that we've touched on a few times here, and that is, where is the new CEO during this crisis, during this pandemic? It is fascinating. I know that Bob Iger is still there for a year. I understand that he stepped down right before all of this really hit the fan, but he's still out there in front of it, and he's still kind of the point person. And, to a certain degree, maybe it's just a comfort thing. Maybe it is just people already know my face, so I'm going to go out there and say it. But I think more than anything, guys, when it comes down to Bob Iger moving out into place and speaking publicly about what the future of the parks might look like, the Walt Disney Company is a huge part of corporate America and runs a lot of corporate America. So when they signal for something, corporate America reacts, corporate America pays attention. Governments pay attention. And so to be talking about this already kind of makes me think that they're trying to nudge all of this, let's return to normalcy forward. Any idea as to whether or not that might have some validity, Tyler?
I mean, like as far as like other people following suit to Disney, you mean?
Yeah. Do you think that Bob Iger is, sort of signaling to everybody else, saying, I think it's time for us to find a way back into some sense of normalcy, some sense of work, some sense of business, if we can?
I feel like his number one goal is his company. I'm not sure that he's really trying to push the envelope to other people in that regard. I mean, I could be wrong. I just think that the number one goal right now for them is to try and figure out how they're going to get people back at these parks, and getting out in front and saying things like that. They're hoping to make people feel better about keeping their vacations and going to the parks again when they reopen. So I'm not sure if he's trying to really push the envelope in that regard, but I mean, you're right in that it'll be a trickle down type of thing where it will probably push other companies to do that. I know that Universal, I brought up Universal a million times so far, but they keep on, they're watching what each other are doing, and they follow suit. So, we could possibly see more things like at Universal. I think they also need to get rid of we've talked about this before, but they need to get rid of those touch points at this point. I don't want to put my finger down on somebody else's finger anymore. So, they're going to have to do a lot of work to make people feel comfortable. And I think this is just one of the first steps in doing so.
No doubt the whole park experience is likely going to change as we know it.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome.